All right, what is going on, everybody? This is Brandon from ComixKings. Welcome, everybody, back to the kingdom, or welcome if this is your first time here. I appreciate all the support you guys have been showing to the channel for the past weeks. I know I've been on a show at least twice every single day. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight on this very special Creators Corner episode where we are joined by Whilce Portacio, the co-creator of Image Comics, the creator of fan favorite X-Men character, Bishop. Whilce, thank you so much for joining me, man. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thanks for bringing me on board here. It gets kind of lonesome in the Batcave, so it's cool to have
Yeah.
to talk to.
Yeah, hey, it does, in the pandemic does that to us a lot, so at least we have like an outlet to go on and still be able to have these conversations that we used to in person or at cons or at the local shops.
That's the interesting thing about, about it taking, going for such a long time now. It's now becoming, like, remember in the beginning, everybody's going, what's this all going to be about, man? How is it going to change everything? And it slowly is changed now. I'm zooming the Philippines, all over the US, every week now, and it's now part of my life now, and it seems I'm talking to people more
right
during the pandemic. Right before, it was just when you go to a convention. Now,
right.
Right.
At least at the convention, you can like go hide backstage, and a computer screen is like, where are you gonna go? You turn off your camera, and everyone is just like, boom, boom, boom.
But we were joking in the beginning that maybe what'll happen at cons is they'll put up a TV, right? A screen, right? And we'll be on there, and under the screen will be like a printer, and so they go, so what do you want as a commission? Oh, Wolvie's head. Oh, okay, and then the machine starts, printing out Wolverine's head, and you can...
right. I do want to say for everybody in the chat, if you're catching the show live, thank you so much. If you do have a question for Whilce, because I know you don't want to talk to me today, feel free to drop something in the comments below in the chat, and we will read it here, weave it in organically into the show. Make sure you guys give the channel today a big thumbs up. We have been planning this for about since October. I think it was probably since October. So yeah, hit that thumbs up. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel if you're not already. All that. And if you guys are catching the replay, thank you so much for taking the time to observe this interview. So Whilce, quick question for you. What got you into comics? What was like your foot into the door?
Well, it's interesting. I've always been a film guy. I first got into story and everything through film, and science fiction and fantasy, through film, with 2001, and and I remember also right when we got in, that was the start of like Terminator and that kind of stuff, and that was just blowing us away. So I always loved the big worlds like that, but I very quickly found the problem with film is that once you get a good concept going and people start getting excited about it, then you got to spend the next 2 years just talking to people about money.
Right.
A lot of money to get things done. And if you don't have a lot of money, that means that battle on Venus, we gotta maybe cut that out, put it on Earth or something, And when I it was actually my cousin, my older cousin. I just moved back down to San Diego, and he knew about San Diego Con. So he forced me over to San Diego Con with my portfolio. And that's where, I got my first job. And I quickly found out the beauty of comics, which is why I'm still in comics, even though I played in other places, and I'm still playing in other places. In comics, I'm basically God. Name your top actress, name your crush in high school. If I want to, she's in my book. I don't have to talk to her agent or anything. If I want it on Venus, it's on Venus, just as long as I can draw it. So for a creative, that's gold, to be able to just go off, and that's really what comics, the place for comics is. It's the place where anything can happen. And like I've been in it for 30 plus years, and every day I see those edges, those outer limits going further and further and further and further out. And now there's nothing, nobody talks about the impossible anymore, right?
Right.
Everything can happen. And in film, everybody used to talk about genres, right? No, a cowboy can't do a romance story. It can't get into horror.
Or a cowboy can't be the Mandalorian in Star Wars.
Exactly. And it's weird too because, like, this is how old I am. Way back, you had Clint Eastwood doing these spaghetti westerns in Italy, in Europe, and everybody goes, no, that's not that can't happen. That's not American. But now those are some of the revered, again, they're called spaghetti westerns and stuff. And then I saw a couple of years ago this really weird mashup. It was a Japanese cowboy setting movie, and the Japanese are fun people, even though they're real quiet. Because get this, I mean, imagine Japanese actors in Japanese locations speaking in Japanese, but there's a voiceover in English.
Right.
But their mouths go like this.
Yeah, because they couldn't add up.
They turn around the Japanese translation into English thing where we always joke, oh, look, their mouths are moving, and the English translation is a lot slower, and they'd pull it. All that kind of stuff told me that I want to do that stuff. I want to go crazy like that, and the only real place you can do that is in comics.
And especially with the X-Men, what else can you do?
Yeah.
Man, like the X-Men, they've been around forever. We've seen new people come in every single day. What got you to really fall in love with the X-Men, or were they your favorite in the first place?
When I first got into it, in the late 60s, I got my first comic books. My next door neighbor, the lady, came over and said, hey, you like comics? And you could have my husband's comics. So I go over there and I grab them all, and there's like Neil Adams, Jack Kirby, Steranko, all the really, really cool stuff. And then that night I hear my next door neighbor screaming, but I got to see all that cool stuff. And that was still the time where it was the FF and the X-Men, because they were kind of a family unit,
Right.
And so if you follow my my X family journey, everywhere, and here's my rant, okay? First Class, MCU, no. First Class is Scott, Gene, Bobby, and Hank, okay? And Warren. If you follow my career, every time editorial shifted them to another book, I went there. I followed the original team. So when we split up with Jim into the big 2-strike teams,
Right.
I lobbied to make sure I kept most of what I considered, First Class.
Right, because you started in X Factor, then you ended up merging into the Uncanny title with Jim Lee and John Byrne, and I forget what the inker's name. I was just looking at him.
T-Baird.
T-Baird. Yeah, because he's doing Ultimate Spider-Man too. I'm like, I just saw him. We don't have a question, but we kind of have like a little. Bishop is one of my husbands. She's all the way from New Zealand, so big shout out to her for making the show.
Place.
Are you reading Marauders with the modern iteration of Bishop? I know she's not asking me because I love it, but she's asking you.
Bishop was my baby. Bishop was the first time I was asked to create a character. And a lot of times when that happens and you're successful, it's because you unconsciously pull out from yourself, And so especially Bishop has a lot of things, of the things I think about, the things I rant about. And I will be honest, after I left and we formed Image, I could not read anything. I have not looked at Bishop after, because I knew that, when he went bald, I would have went crazy if I was there, if I was reading.
Oh my gosh.
When he got pirate boots, I would have freaked. So I try not to. The only time I let go of that was I finally went to see the movie where he was in.
Ooh.
And there were some changes there, but I was really, really happy that the few issues of Bishop I did, the origin and on, most of that original character is in the movie. Is
Right.
who Bishop is who I intended him to be. So
Right.
the answer is no, and I don't want to hear what happened.
He got a haircut.
Ah, his hair's
But he's
green.
great. But he's great. He's great in the book, and he's basically playing advisor to Kate Pride, or they renamed her to Katie Pride. He's one of the more compelling characters in the Marauders book, in my opinion. He's in the hands of Jerry Dugan, so he's doing great.
Well, see, here's a lot of people don't know this because they don't really ask. It's is that when I created Bishop, Bob Harris, the editor, called up and he says, and I'm like halfway in to I think it was, yeah, I was halfway through the first issue, right? And Bob calls up 2 weeks, and you got 4 week periods, right, to do a whole issue.
Right.
I'm halfway through, and Bob calls up and says, "Hey, we all decided you need another member, so create a new X-Men." And I go, "What are my parameters, Bob?" And he goes, "Just make him badass, like Wolverine." That's all he said. And so I went about building this character in 2 weeks, and here's a nitpick thing with me. I understand because I'm a military brat, so I grew around a lot of military people. I know some people in like Spec Ops and stuff, and I know the psychology of that, and a lot of the tail end, bad end part of that is the psycho trip. You just see such bad shit,
Right.
And that is basically Wolverine. He's a traumatized person, and that's where he gets a lot of his energy to do what he needs to do. And in one way, I could admire that, but I know the psychology, and in the real world, 9 times out of 10, that doesn't end good, And so when I created Bishop, I tried to create a character that could do what Wolverine does, but how do I get him there without being psychologically
right, psychologically behind most of the group, right? Because Bishop is more of like an advanced copy, right? He comes from the future. He's back in the past. He has like that drive that Wolverine has. This is like from me just reading years of Bishop, right? This is just me, but he has everything that you want, like that someone from like a military veteran does. And it's like, now that you said the two, I'm like, this makes perfect sense. It's just
the crux of it was if like back in the day, I used to read the Conan novels, the original, Robert E. Howard stuff,
or the Roy Thomas stuff when he came out of Marvel,
right? Which was based a lot on that,
right,
stuff.
right.
If you remember back to the fabled urban legend origin of Conan, he was a baby born on the battlefield. And I love that concept. And for me, Bishop born into Days of Future Past is just that. He's born into this world where if you don't have it, you're gone pretty soon, right?
Right.
The only way to survive is to have those tools that Wolverine has. And so I then thought psychologically, because that's for everything boils down to the psycho side of things. And I thought psychologically, if you're born into that and you genetically just have that DNA and you can survive, that's kind of like, breathing. It's kind of like, yeah, it's what I do. So what, and so it doesn't mean anything to you. So the character I created was, he would be upstairs battling sentinels and then all this other crap. But what he's doing is he's looking at his clock going, hey, it's 5 o'clock now and it's time to clock out. And he goes downstairs and, hey, where's the party?
Right.
Because if that is your reality every day, then the contrast to that, what seems more important to you is like people, relationships, what's real. And so that's the character I built. it was just so easy for him to fight. It's just so easy for him to be the heavy artillery guy, the guy that everybody relies on, the big wall, but he didn't really care about that stuff because he was just born that way. It was just easy that way. And so that's how I wanted to develop him that's why we brought him into the past. Because the past, as bad as it is nowhere near as bad as Days of Future Past.
Right.
And so for him, it's like, oh, wow, this is battling in the past is like, that's like a party.
Yeah, he was like having such a great time. And when he started fighting Colossus, he's like, damn, man, I got some. He's like, finally.
And he's with his idols, Storm, his forever crush, man. It's.
Oh my gosh! When Ford's left her in that issue, he was like, he looked out the window. I was like, Bishop, shut up. But before you did create Bishop, while this was all in the works, question: how did you get into X Factor? Because I felt you took this to another level. Shout out to Maurice for this question. Maurice is one of my very good friends in this community.
Well, one of the things in common that the seven of us have in Image is we think. And so here I was working on Punisher. Okay, my first full penciling job, right? And I realized that on one side of the 11 by 17, right, of the original work, on one side is where the drawings are, right?
Right.
So I'm doing Punisher on this side. Now I also knew that this is back in the day, it was FedEx. I knew when the FedEx package would come into the office, the editors would take the package first, and like you're the assistant editor, I'm the editor, I'm doing this. So all you see is a blank page, right? And I'm going, oh cool. And so I knew that was happening. That psychology was happening. And so what I did on the backs of some of my Punisher pages is I drew Wolverine.
That's the perfect spot for Wolverine, is in a Punisher book.
Yeah. So now the assistants are going, hey, wow, look, you can draw the X-Men. And it's just such a small family that, they went over to Anderson and go, hey, maybe we should bring this guy into the fold. And they said, okay, let's try him out on X Factor. And Louise Simonson, bless her heart, was the writer, because I could not have asked for a better introduction into the really heavy hitter side of things, right? Because when you get into the X office, that's like you got to be totally professional, right?
It's special. It's special.
It's special. You're instantly a superstar the closer you get to Uncanny, right? At the time. And here I was, the new kid, just off of this small book called Punisher. And I'm working with Louise Simonson, married to Walter Thor Simonson. And I get this phone call, and it's Wheezy going, hey, Whilce, welcome aboard. And then she floors me. Her first question is, Whilce, what do you like to draw? I'm going, I'm thinking I'm stepping into the big boys, and I'm going to have to, kowtow to everybody and do what everybody wants. But Wheezy Simonson is saying, what do I want to draw? And so I blurt out, I like Japanese girls. Can I draw a Japanese girl? And Wheezy goes, well, Bobby doesn't have a girlfriend. Cool.
Let me get her one. Let me get him one.
And then she goes, hey, she's Japanese, so maybe we should do something with samurais. And I go, I was just in the Appleseed. I go, hey, what about cybernetic samurais? Cool. And she writes it all up exactly the way, as if I wrote it, nothing in there is just pure wheeze. It's all her welcoming me into the X office by letting me do what I want to do. And I realize that what she's doing. And so I go, fuck, man, I'm going to hit it out of the park, man, because if I hit it out of the park and they're letting me do what I want to do, maybe the pull through is everywhere else I go after this, they're going to let me do whatever I want to do. And That's
It's
basically
uncanny. That's awesome, man. What do you want to do? Draw Japanese women. Great. Did Iceman and Wolverine ever go on a double date?
No, but if you look real closely, I'm in a couple panels with some friends of mine.
Just making your cameo appearance.
Well, see that I learned in high school because I've always been drawing. So when I was growing up in high school in Hawaii, I became friends with one of the Miss Teen USA's, right? Before she did her pageant. And because I was known as the guy that, hey, you got a favorite song? I'll draw you the band and put on the lyrics, and then give me $1 and and it's yours. And so that's how I got to meet girls and stuff. And so that's how I understood art works. And so when I started actually drawing comics, I started putting my friends in there, and so they go, "Oh wow, cool! You drew me. Oh cool!" Or I remember even while we were still on Punisher, Jim Lee and I, we met the owners at San Diego Con of the biggest comic book store in Hawaii called Jellies. And so in some panels, we started drawing the comic book store in Hawaii. But, of course, it's in New York, but there's Jellies all of a sudden. And guess what? That's how we got 3 free trips to Hawaii, Jim.
That's how you get. I'm sure you and Jim are having a great time during that whole trip.
It was fantastic. I mean, because it was, it's one thing that it's a lot of people are going to find hard to replicate now, because it was such a small family back then. It was such a small family. I mean, Jim and I were the Asian guys in the 80s. So if you strictly adhere to history, so whenever we do interviews, it's always been so what kind of hassles did you guys get because you were the immigrants? We never got hassled for even 1 second, because there's only 50 guys that could draw these comic books in
right.
So it's once they found out we could do it, it was whatever you guys want, man.
Right. And especially back then, if I recall, it's once you're on a book, you stay there if you can do it consistently.
That is my big pet peeve. When they say, hey, you want to be on X-Men, you're on X-Men until you totally screw up 5 times in a row. Now, when they say you want to be on X-Men, you got to then ask how many issues, because it's going to be 3, it's going to be 4. It's never going to be a continuing run. And I feel sorry for a lot of fans, because that's how you got to know us. Like all of us 7 are known for certain characters because we were able to draw them for enough of a time for you to relate them with us. So when our fans would go back, they would go back and look for stuff with our names on it, but then also look for Angel,
Mark, or you look for Angel,
or and then even when I'm not on the book, the decades that I'm not on the book, and there are new fans of Warren, but through another artist, those fans can then be introduced to some of my fans and say, well, if you like that version, you should check out Whilce's version, because again, is associated with Warren and Storm and Wolverine sometimes and stuff like that. And that was all because of just like what you said. We could stay on a book, if we wanted to, forever. And that's how you really build, we didn't have the terms back then, but that's how you really build your brand. And, looked into that.
Right. And we were talking backstage. You asked me what I liked, and all the books I highlighted, right? What Donny Cates is doing, what James Tynion is doing, what Jonathan Hickman's doing with the X-Men, is because they all have the same artists. Right. It's because it's writer and artist, right? A lot of times, you'll have these filler runs, these filler stories, which is okay. Or you'll have this issue's drawn by this person, this one's drawn by this one, or this one, right? And it's each artist has a different way of storytelling. There's just as much of a storytelling. They each have you're having a different filler person on Spider-Man. You have a different artist for, let's say, each issue of an arc of Spider-Man. Each person is going to have their own interpretation of that story, which makes it harder for the overall thing to read.
And also it goes even further than that, because setting up creative teams, art teams, it is like dating. You need time. I mean, how many people, friends, or girls that you meet, that the first time you met them, you were going, but then later on you became really good friends, right?
Right.
You need time. And so there are the side effect of that, the unconscious side effect of that, which helped again our brands, is that I was able to bring Scott Williams, an old high school buddy, in, and we had months and months of him figuring out my shorthand in penciling, figuring out what I was trying to do with this special effect or this thing. Then the colors, the same thing, multiple issues to try to figure out. And then we could talk to each other and say, hey, next time I do this, that's kind of cool, but can you pull it this way or that? So after a couple, like 6 months, we're now a fine-tuned team,
Right.
When you only have like 2 or 3 issues on average to work with each other, and then it's somebody else because now you're working with another editor and he only has, his list of people that he trusts, you don't get that. You don't have that time to really grow into each other. And so the artwork then floods more.
Right. It dips a little bit. And I think like the scripting and the storytelling kind of does as well.
Exactly.
And we do have another question. My guy Azores Tiger, what is your favorite X-Men issue you worked on?
It has to be the Bishop issues, those intro first few issues, because I was allowed to. I didn't know that. 2 things. I didn't know that it wasn't standard operating procedure in other art fields to only have 2 weeks to introduce a new character, and then in the 3rd week put him into the book, right?
Right.
So I didn't know that was basically kind of a test. Would I hesitate to take that challenge, and would I fail at that challenge? I was young and dumb. I go, yeah, sure, cool, no problem. I'll call you in 2 weeks, and then I did it, and it worked. Bob loved it, and then fans liked it, and so.
Right here.
Yeah, so I don't know if you know it. Do you know this? Look really close to that cover. See Malcolm and Randall?
Right.
Okay, I'm introducing a badass character, but there's going to be a big, huge situation with Fitzroy and all that stuff, and a cast of millions, right? So there's going to be no time to pace down everything, and Bishop can go, I'm a nice guy too. He just has to come out badass from the get-go, right? And so I solved that by going, hey, I'm going to introduce 2 other people, his teammates, and they love him so much that they would die for him. So these 2 characters were going to die no matter what. That's what they were built for. They would die to show Bishop was this great person, not only commander, and without Bishop having to say it or captions having to say it, just the action. If you look real closely,
right,
one of them is me, and one of them is Scott Williams.
You're on the left. Scott Williams is on the right.
Yeah, Scott Williams when he had hair. When Scott was young, he looked like Agassi, and if you're into tennis,
right. That's awesome, man.
But see, again, because we started getting to that point, we could do whatever we wanted. Because again, another thing we all realize, and I keep hammering on, you got to think, people, you got to think. We understood that 4 weeks, right? 4 weeks to do everything. So if you prove you can do everything in 4 weeks, they try to keep you. And that means they don't have time to edit. They don't have time to go, oh, Whilce, we might have a problem, using your likeness and Scott Williams. So you go, no, it's already done. Sorry, there's no time. So we're able to do a lot of stuff and really play. And unknowingly, we were doing, one of the things that a lot of people love about, movies today, the Easter eggs,
Right.
So it's cool. It was a big ride. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, there were a lot of, bad sides there's bad sides to everything. But for punk kids to be able to to prove that, you know, we were worth something, and them, you know, unleashing us and letting us go. And then later on after that, unleashing ourselves and making image and making a playing field for other people. I can't complain about that.
Right. And that's awesome, man. I mean, just putting you guys in the book is great. And then after the book, right, you guys went over to Image. Now we all know the classic story of what happened. If you can kind of talk about that and how the 7 you guys got together for us.
Well, see, it was, again, I have to go back to thinking. It was an interesting time because context is everything to me. So for people that remember, at the time, Star Wars was just starting to really blow, you know, and a lot of people forget that the big real reason why all of this stuff that we love on the periphery of the mediums that we like, you know, toys, animation, games, collectibles, you know, and all that, t-shirts, everything. George Lucas started that because when he was doing each successive movie, he asks for what's called ancillary rights. Those are the rights for those things. And up until that point, those things never really did well. It was only about the movie. But George understood it was going beyond that it was going to become a franchise. I don't know if he knew exactly that's where it was, but I knew he felt that was going that way. And so in comics, here we were, imagine, you know, Todd and Spider-Man, you know, and Rob, and then, you know, Eric and everybody, all of us 7, still in the in Marvel, doing what we're doing and raising the stakes up and raising our stature. And we go to San Diego Con every year, and there are all these kids, you guys, with t-shirts with our drawings on them. Right. Not just one, but 10, 15 different ones. And then everybody's asking about the toys. Everybody's asking the possibility of animation and stuff like that. We went back to Marvel and go, hey guys, we're starting to sniff what George is starting to do in film. What do you guys think? They said, nah, it's not going to work. And we're going, no, every time we go to a convention, we see it. You know, you got vendors out there that are not official vendors selling all this stuff. And people are just gobbling it up. What do you mean it's nothing? And so that was really one of the big impetuses for us to actually break away, because we started getting used to being able to call the punches in our books. Right. And so it was a little frustrating then to try to call, you know, to try to make shots happen in other parts of it, you know, the ancillaries and stuff, and getting a wall. So we figured out how comics was made, and it's actually very simple. The hardest part is actually just drawing it and writing it, you know. Right. Because there's an infrastructure. You send the stuff over to Cubicore, the printers, and they send the stuff over to Diamond, and then Diamond sends the stuff over to the stores. It's automatic. You know, right. The hard part is just doing the producing. Right. And so we decided, hey, let's break away and let's call all the shots. Let's prove them wrong that it isn't only about the book itself. It's about the whole brand and what you can do with it after. And we were right? You know, history now proves us, you know, that we were right. And you know, to get to the next question that everybody always asks, no, there was no fear. There was no fear leaving Marvel because we were, you know, young and dumb. And
well, you guys also went to DC and said we're not working for you either.
Yeah. And let's say it all failed. Okay. Let's say it wasn't time and it all failed. Right. And let's say we try to go back to Marvel and DC, and let's say they you know, they snobbed us and say, no, you guys did a boo-boo, you burned a bridge, so you can't come back. Well, then we would have been forced into concept design or animation or gaming, which was starting to blow at the time. So we will win no matter what.
Right.
It was
Hey,
the time,
there you go. I do want to highlight, especially someone in the chat. This is my good friend Chet. He's the biggest X-Men fan I know. And he has more signed X-Men comics than I could ever imagine. And he's like the guru. I could say, name this panel of X-Men 284, and he would say, or name this panel, or I'd show him a panel and be like, X-Men 285. And he'd be right. I love this guy to death. But and I know he wouldn't miss this for the world.
We need more of him.
Yes, we do love him. But dude, like that's crazy. Like you guys broke away, and I just love hearing that story every time because you guys left Marvel, went to DC, said no, and then did your own thing. And it's like even if you guys went back to Marvel, Whilce is back on Punisher. Jim Lee is probably doing some Joe Schmo in the Marvel universe that nobody knows. But that's crazy. And then you guys, everyone knows you guys didn't have any fear because of like the way everything just worked out, would you do anything different if you could go back in time?
The only thing that I would do different is have a magic wand to age all of us 3 years, just 3 more years, so that we. The biggest regret I have is that we imagine this, okay? Because Jim was an Ivy Leaguer. He's real good with numbers. You guys don't know this, but we actually ran 3 test conventions before we did Image. We just wanted to see what the convention market was like to use as support for building Image. And we actually lost money, right? Because we were paying for everything and, blah, blah, blah. Well, after taxes, Jim took our taxes and we got money back, okay? So Jim is the numbers guy, right? Rob, some people don't know, Rob's sister was already in Hollywood. So Rob had the connections into Hollywood already, which is why he got the first Mattel calls and stuff like that, right? And Spike Lee called him, right? Todd is fearless in sniffing out what's next. Right. I remember when he bought his dragster, we were going, Todd, what are you doing? This is why you're late with your book. Come on, Todd, concentrate. Yeah. And then he went off and did toys, and we're going, oh my God, Todd,
what are you doing?
Yeah, but he was on to something, right?
Because
me, I said earlier, I'm the tech artist guy. I love fiddling and figure out where we're going, where we're going to go with all this stuff. And Mark, was the artiste. In my book, he's hands down the best artist of the bunch. Eric,
really?
Yeah. He's finesse.
Right.
He's slam bam action, which we all are, but he also then finesses, because if you're gonna get serious, that's another thing we understood. If you're gonna get other fields to be serious about you, you got to have a couple of those finesse guys to show them that there's another level possible with this stuff. And then Jim Valentino. Jim was in merchandise and the George Lucas stuff way before. He was doing skateboards back then too. Okay, come on,
man.
And Eric was like, he was our energy. He was our powerhouse, right? Look at today. You cannot, his house burned down twice, right? You cannot stop Eric from drawing. He will just draw. He is the real reason and energy for doing comics. And so my biggest regret is that we all didn't understand that about each other deeply enough and decided, okay, Image, let's form this massive studio with all the studios. Let's let everybody do what everybody can do. And then think about that. If we weren't separate studios, because we really were separate studios, but imagine we were all together and we had everything in there. Imagine the studio we'd be today, right? When Disney buys Star Wars, we might be on that that short list of, okay, what studio do we send it out to re-envision Star Wars, right? or when
Right.
or when they thought about aliens or going into anything new, because we were all about everything. You know, that's one of the great things about being a dude in comics, because of those 4-week production periods. Think about it. In games, in film, in animation, they get up to like 4 years to do.
Right.
You have to do in 4 weeks.
Yeah, you guys get to do it all. And I always think like the imagination in comics, like as we were talking about earlier, the imagination in comics goes far beyond like any dimension that film can. Like film, like you can visually see it. It's easier to get hooked onto, but it's much harder to like get that imagination into your comic books. You can do whatever you want in a comic book. Film always to me has like a glass ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, I mean, as much as I love a lot of the movies, look at it. You know, remember the first basically 10 years of the start of big superheroes, going to Iron Man, into Spider-Man, into Batman, into everything, right? The first 10 years, it was every 3 years, reissue of the Origin with a new director.
Right.
New
Right.
stuff, right?
Every Batman story, every Batman movie recaps the killing of his parents.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a little exhausting, and something that I've come to realize, especially like when you asked me earlier backstage, like what do you think of comics today, is everyone has their own take on a character. I don't think comics will ever be what they were, where everyone has one tunnel vision you're working toward. Right now it feels like this is what this person has to say about this character. This is what this person has to say about this character. And every time you get a new writer, it's more of, this is just what they have to say. And I've seen that in film as well, right? You compare it, Zack Snyder and Joss Whedon, their Justice Leagues. This is one vision of the Justice League, and this is another vision of the Justice League.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, look at the progression of Batman into Dark Knight. Okay. It wasn't just a Dark Knight fad. A lot of creators hopped onto it because they could see, oh yeah, psychologically, that is one of the options of what would happen to Bruce Wayne.
Right.
He would really go over the deep end that way. He would not stay the billionaire guy who happens to fight crime at night, forever. It was a development, and the X-Men going into full inclusivity of all mutants. We even played it in there where the first class, the original team, discover that for themselves then too, in all the new X-Men that they would meet up, and learn that that's actually one of the things Professor X was concentrating on from the very beginning.
Right, which is bringing together that big togetherness. And again, you asked me what I liked, and I said that's exactly why I love what Jonathan Hickman is doing. It's because you have that tunnel vision, and he has a team of people around him that all have that tunnel vision.
And you might get a lot of comments from this, but I'll say it because I'm a grumpy old guy, right? Been around for too long.
Hey, go ahead, because I have a lot of hot takes on here that people already judge me for. I don't like Cyclops, so. But,
I got an issue with you.
Hey, okay, your turn.
But see, along the lines of what we're talking about, right? Creating what's now called an IP, right? That is solid, but it's still malleable enough to develop, to adjust, to grow. I worry that as franchise become billion-dollar babies, they won't be flexible anymore.
Right.
Because, like, for instance, again, here's a controversial part. I'm a film guy, so I can look at the Joker movie and say this is a great movie. But as a comic guy with history, I say this is blasphemy, because the context of the birth of Batman, was that time in the early 20th century in America. The rich were having a bitch of a time with crime. The poor were having a bitch of a time with crime. The middle class, the same thing. It was hard. We were a young country. And so the thought came up, maybe we need a hero that can cross the line. He was the first Wolverine. And so the question then was, because we were still traditional back then, how do we make a vigilante, a hero?
Right.
Well, when you develop characters, it's all about contrast. If your hero is a vigilante and he's able to cross the line, then his nemesis has to be the worst villain there ever was, which is why he crosses the line. And so the Joker's only real purpose in life is to be the Joker. Like when Heath did the Joker, I had no problems with all, because that's a progression into really making him really, really crazy, really, really out there, and why we really need Batman, and getting mad because Bruce hasn't solved that problem yet, and so there's roles that things create. And again, I'm a film guy, so I understand getting into the psychology of the Joker and showing that his progression as a real person, but his purpose in life is to give purpose to Batman, because the more human that the Joker becomes, the more bad people look at Bruce Wayne.
Right. And to your point, there are like we were talking about earlier, everyone has like their story, and I forget who directed that movie or produced it. That's like kind of what they see the Joker as. And even in comics today, you have a bunch of different envisions of Joker. You have Jeff Johns, who says there are 3 different Jokers, right? Each one has a different purpose. You have what Grant Morrison said, and he just changes his psyche over the years. Then you have what Alan Moore says. He says, "Screw all you guys, I'm right," and produces the best Batman Joker story of all time.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the other beauty of comics, other than because it's every 4 months, in all of the other mediums, especially film, you got to take like a year with the writers and totally figure it all out, totally get into the background of every character, totally figure out, all those things, point of no return, want to need, flaw, everything, before you start production. In comics, because we only have 4 weeks, it's, "Hey, Brandon, what about this idea?" And you go, "Oh yeah, that's kind of cool, but what if you did this? Oh, I like that. That'll make it real cool. Okay, so all right, cool." And in 10 minutes, I called up the editor and we pitch it. And the editor goes, "Oh, that's kind of cool. All right, start drawing it." We can start drawing it. And then the next month, we start doing a little other part of it. And let's say the next month we add in a side character because we want to do something specific with that character, right? And that book comes out and the fans aren't getting it. So now we have the 4th issue to try to push them a little further there to see if everybody starts to get it, and they're still not getting it. So then the 5th issue, we add in a new character to see a new take on that. And then the fans are getting it. So we can progressively go from just a, "Hey, what about this cool thing?" Whereas everybody else has a, "Hey, this is a cool thing. Now let's sit down for a year and try to figure it all out." To me, that's boring. I love the get up and go of comics, the get up of go of, "Oh man, cool. Wow. Yeah. Hey, a lot of the design stuff that you see in the X books from Jim and I was because we started watching anime. We were the people that saw them across. We were given the manga for Appleseed at the time. We saw something called Lensman, Fist of the North Star at the time. We were some of the first people to see that. And when we absorbed Appleseed, that's what we pulled in. We go, "Wow, that's really cool." And we called it cyberware. And, that's a Scotty, that's Cable, that's, all of our weapons. And that was the birth of the new design of, organic ships and stuff like that.
Speaking of Cable, I love this comment. I just wanted to highlight it. And then we did have a question. Chet says, "We're excited to see Bishop in Days of Future Past." We did already discuss this. Chet was a little bit late to the party, but
the only caveat I have there, though, is I'm an Idris fan. I think he's like one of the. He would have been really, really great there. Though I hear now Method Man is lobbying for the thing, so and Idris is a big star now, so
Yeah.
I have to go with Method Man right now. But my original thought was Idris Elba. But the actor that actually did he pulled it off. He's such a tall, big guy, and Storm just leaned on him like that, and he was just always there. And again, that's who I see Bishop as.
Right.
And he's not itching to kill people. He's not, but he's got to take those guys out.
Right. And I don't know if you ever saw the Wolverine in the X-Men show. That was during the height of my childhood. I loved that interpretation of Bishop a lot. Like, that's the Bishop that I connected with since day one. Because it was like, he was always looking out for everyone else, and he wasn't afraid. Like, once he got ticked off, he knew what to do. He knew how to get something done. Nothing stopped him. So that mindset that we were talking about from Wolverine earlier was very prevalent. It's just he didn't have that berserker or that kind of rage built up. It was more motivation and self-awareness.
Well, see, I took that from top athletes, even boxers, right? Well, you put Tyson to one corner because he's so unique, but everybody, Ali, Jackie Robinson, Sugar Ray, Manny Pacquiao, every single one of them are big bruisers, but they never lose their cool. I mean, the whole thing is, if you lose control, you're going to miss that punch. You're going to miss that opening because it's a split second when that person is opening, and you could take advantage. So you always have to be in control. And that's how I always envision a Bishop. But since you opened it up a little while ago, let me tell you who Cyclops really is.
All right, let's talk about Cyclops. I'll allow it.
Okay. For me, I went off of the original Stan Lee version, and what I absorbed from that, and what I pulled through in the books I did with Scott, was that he was a born leader, because there is such thing as that. You're born with the personality perfect for a certain job. You're born with the DNA, so that you could have the biology perfect for this skill set, and so. For me, Cyclops was born to be a leader, which was defined in his head. Here's a situation. I'm calm. We need to do this. Bobby, do this. Hank, get on that. But he just hated ordering people around. He just psychologically didn't want to be the leader. He was the perfect leader in that he could always figure out the right thing. He could always go, Wolverine, no, don't tear up the couch. Calm down. Storm, rein it in a little bit, and to his brother, Havoc, turn around.
Havoc, turn around and go find Polaris.
But he just didn't like it. And that's why it kind of irked me that then the narrative started becoming that he just couldn't hack it.
Right. In my experience, my biggest issue with Cyclops, and it's we're almost designed. I felt like when I'm reading the Chris Claremont omnibus, right, with John Byrne. So some awesome people in the community do a show where it's every issue they go to the next one, right? They start at a giant size 94. Each week is the next one. And they're great. I don't think they're here right now, but it's almost like Scott can't really objectify, or it's he has trouble following the objective, And personally, if I think my girlfriend is dead, someone that I love, I'm not going out with Colleen Wing the second I get back into town. I'm trying to figure out where she is. And it's some missions I thought were designed for Cyclops to make that call that just doesn't give him that extra, he's too reserved.
Right.
He's tries to be on top. He's yeah, I got this. But when it's time for it, he always pulls back.
Yeah, yeah, and you've got a good point there, so we don't disagree. Okay, you got a good point there, because the other big thing that really happened was once Jim and I got on the X books, Wolverine was reborn, right? And that was a cosmic shift, right? The first ever superhero to really cross the line. Batman never actually crossed the line, right?
No.
He just seemed like he would. He just talked like he would, right? But Wolverine was the first one to actually really cross over the line. And so back then there was a little debate on whether that should happen. Very much akin to, Superman in, Henry Cahill killing Zod, there was this, is this real? Is it, and it was taken out of our hands because the fans went with Wolverine. And so we then understood, because we're doing this for you guys. We understood that's the way you're going. And then we started looking at the whole world. And that's really around the time the world started, in my opinion, really going crazy to, where we are, right now, and we won't go into it. But Wolverine was that first sign of that, and so no matter what I could have done with Scott, he was obsolete once Wolverine came on the scene. He would have had to been pulled off.
Right. And to your point, I love that Wolverine kind of does bring up that question time and time again. And I think that's why he's kind of been more animalized lately. But then you have like films like Logan or like Old Man Logan on it, which really kind of show that difference, right? And I think like the biggest thing with Scott is he needs to lose something in order, because he's listed as one of the biggest potentially powerful mutants, because he's never really done what. He's never really had that fire. I don't really think that he has. He's been more concerned about other people, which is what I like with him, rather than just going off the deep end. Like when Wolverine, like you tell Wolverine, right, to be more human, don't use your claws. His family dies and the claws come out.
Right.
You're holding back years of rage. You're holding back like a purpose, a statement mission.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, again, we weren't really totally conscious of all this stuff, but it actually still makes sense, which is the beauty of the organicness of the book. Because you got to remember, Scott's little brother is basically a bomb that could go off at any moment, and not only kill lots of people, but himself. And then what happened to Jean? Where she went there and she came back. It's like you can imagine it. Everybody goes, yeah, Scott, you're one of the most powerful potential superheroes out there. What's he thinking? Because of his experience, because his his family.
Right.
We're Skywalkers. we're doomed. We're going to go to the bad side. And so I've got to keep calm. I don't want to get there. And so when Wolverine and Storm steps up, it's like, okay, I see a new world. Okay. Because I don't want to go in there, and because I'm gonna be the Superman to the Batman and fight Wolverine on this. And I might lose it one day and prove everybody that I am one of the most powerful superheroes out there and just totally go nuclear.
Right.
It's interesting. It actually kind of works out, in the way everything, and maybe that's a lot of what you were saying, that there is this focus, and I have to admit that especially in the 80s, it petered out in the 90s, but in the 80s, editors were constantly nagging us about this. They always had this one pull through with everybody, with any new story. You got to make sure the first few pages that new, and we were always targeting the new 14-year-old to get in, right? That new 14-year-old that picks up that very first X-Men, your issue that month, that he can get in there and not feel lost. That you won't be referencing all these things just by the name, like the Clone Wars, that you will explain a little bit of that. You will give them the reference.
Right. You'll lean them into the book.
Lean them into the book.
Right.
And listening to a lot of fans through the decades, that's been a common complaint, right?
Right, especially nowadays. We were also talking about that a little bit. What Marvel's doing now is they have like before the story, they have like previously, this is what happened, right? It gives like the origin, then it gives like a little 2 sentences of what happened in the preview, like of what's going on, which I think is great. DC doesn't do that. They just say DC probably presents Batman by this, this, and this.
Yeah, and it seeps into the business side of things. Like I remember when Kirkman told me his idea of doing this. You remember he does every year $100 hardbound Walking Dead book that he sells at bookstores and airports and stuff like that.
Right.
So he doesn't target the fans because the fans have the singles, right? He targets our loved ones who are willing to spend $100 for a birthday or for Christmas or something like that, right? And so there's that infrastructure, right? There's that ability to have a backstory, and so like to go really way back, what you said with Marvel and what they're doing with some books now. You look back at our Punisher books, exactly the same thing. The first page almost all was just a forward going in, and so you go to today and like that your girlfriend, your mom, wants to spend $100 on you for your birthday or Christmas or something. They walk into a comic book store and go, "Hey, my son loves Walking Dead," and then what's the guy over there gonna say? So which issues do you want?
Right.
What's your mom gonna say?
She's like, "Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about."
Right.
She might say, "Here's Invincible," same guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or whatever they have, and everybody doesn't have everything.
Right.
The economy just doesn't work out that way right now. So there is something to that what we were back then. I have to be honest. We felt we were forced to do that, but now looking at the other side, that's how we kept. I mean, do you understand this? That when I was working on Uncanny in the 80s, and I'm not talking up until the 2 battle books, right?
Right.
I'm talking before that, right? When I was working on it before that, we were selling 400,000 copies a month, right? What book regularly sells 400 copies a month today?
I don't know the exact numbers. Probably not a lot. Probably like 1 or 2.
Those are always the first issues,
right there.
And
mainly get
like
I could tell you the Keanu Reeves one that just sold out the wazoo that I'm sure everyone knows about. But
then of course that's Keanu, right?
Right. That's Keanu Reeves doing John Wick, who's also very immortal.
Right. So it's mostly just his fans buying it because it's
right, and everyone's just like, can Keanu Reeves write a comic book?
Right. The real numbers are basically something around about 5 books every month get past 100,000. But that's because it has. I mean, like Star Wars was one of the first a couple of years ago, first big, huge #1, right? But how many variants did it have?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, and today in comics, you have people who are buying 4 or 5 copies of one book on that day, right? Like you'll want a reader copy, you'll want one like a collectible, a 1 to 50 variant, a 1 and something variant. Okay, will this one be worth more money? To me, I don't necessarily buy that way, but I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for like the broad sense of people.
Right.
Obviously, the sales are going to be driven up because one person is buying 5 covers or one person is buying 3 covers. What I wish they showed was how many
people,
like individuals, right? What is the 1-to-1 ratio? Like one person to one to no matter how many. Let's say 5 books counted as 1. What is that ratio?
Yeah, because like when we were doing 400,000, there were no variant. I only did the cover,
Right.
That was it. And so almost everybody was buying a comic book because there's no such thing as CGC or really conventions at the time either, So it was just that typical, hand down to other people, right? I mean, a lot of people during our time, that's what they all say, how they got into it. A
Hand
friend
me
of
downs,
a friend bought something, and then it was your turn to read it, and you thought it was cool, and then you finally went to a comic book store. Well, actually, no, there were no comic book stores. That was the other part of it too. They can go to the drugstore. They could go to the Walmart. They could go to, well, back then it was Woolworths, or Sears, and there's comic books. They didn't have to hunt for it. They didn't have to
Right.
look for it. They didn't have to look it up. It was just available almost, not almost everywhere, but it was easy to find. You
Right.
could, like, in your big cities, you could just walk and find, on the big street corners and the little newsstand, they're selling comic books too.
Right. And I think like another reason is for like sales being a lot higher. There are like more copies being distributed over multiple sources. Today, I think a lot of publishers lower the print run so that eventually there is that hunt. There is that kind of like desire to get that book. I really liked this question a lot. It was asked a while ago. If there's a Marvel storyline you would like to redraw if you had the opportunity.
There's nothing I would like to redraw, because I don't believe, I break away from George Lucas there. I don't believe in, I believe in giving your all at the moment and not going back to it, but I'll answer the question in this way. There's a story I was itching to do, and one of my regrets in leaving was I was never able to do the story that we were starting to talk about it. Was that I've always wanted, because I started getting attached to my name started getting attached to Archangel, right? And everybody, and we were just making him cool, but I wanted to go, I'm more into psychology. I wanted to go more into him. And I felt that we started forgetting that he was a tool of
Apocalypse.
Of Apocalypse.
Right.
We kind of like, oh yeah, that's his origin. That's why he's got the wings. And then we kind of like forget, oh, he's an X-Men, so he can go on and do his adventures.
He can do whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I wanted to do was I wanted like a couple issues where Warren just disappeared. He big things are happening and he was not on the team. He was gone. And then so I wanted then Cyclops to send Wolverine to find him. And then I wanted Wolverine to find him on a deserted island, in one of those islands that World War II was fought in. So there's all these huge warehouses that are abandoned and totally hollowed out, right? Because they were stripped through the years. And he gets in there, and the whole insides are torn out, and the walls are like scraped like crazy. And then you finally see what you think is Archangel in one corner of the warehouse, and it's only his wings. At the other corner, like in a boxing match, is Warren without the wings. And they've been fighting it out, duking it out this whole time because Apocalypse activated. Remember, that was the whole thing. When activate the wings. And so Warren knew that the wings were going to start to be activated. We could go into today's parlance where they were little test programs to make sure everything was working perfectly before he launched.
Everything with Apocalypse was a test. That was like kind of like his niche.
Yeah. So Warren has been in there by himself for all this time, keeping those wings from getting out and onto the world and starting Apocalypse, whatever his master plan was. And so I wanted to go into something really big and massive just to remind us to that. I don't know where I never figured out where I would want it to go, whether Warren would be able to then control the wings, maybe Forge comes in, or there was an appeal for me to go back old school and make him Angel again,
Right. And I think what you could also do is like maybe like have him struggle a little bit more, right? Maybe he can go to Sinister, because when mutants are confused, they like to go to Sinister. You know, like he could get frustrated with Professor X, right? They find him, they bring him back, he gets frustrated, and like that instinct kind of kicks in. He gets mad, and Sinister's like, boom, right? Or maybe,
yeah. You know, you're onto something there. You know, like the professor doesn't want to destroy the wings,
right? Because he thinks that's unique to him.
Yeah, well, and it's also his connection to Apocalypse. Maybe they could Forge can trace back and find where Apocalypse is hidden, right? But Warren
wants to be himself. He's like ready to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I think part of like what you guys did with him, and even like what Walter and Louis did with creating him, is he's always been very impatient due to like his father.
Yeah. No, he's
right.
A rich guy.
He's a rich guy who's never really had that connection with his father, and that just makes him very impatient and very impulsive, which is why I think that would fit so well.
Right. And then the professor could find out that there's a because it's Apocalypse, there's another little hidden thing there, that one of the things underneath that the wings were doing with Warren's biology was one of those connector bombs. If you destroy the wings, Warren dies.
Right. That's
but
like
Warren is, but think about it. Warren, from the psychology you said, he then gets to the point where now I could really prove I'm a real X-Men. And we're willing to take the real sacrifice.
Right. Or what else you can do is you can go to Psylocke, right? Because Psylocke can manipulate that, and they did have that relationship back then. So that's another avenue that you could go on as well with that story.
But like, just what we're doing right now, and we agree with each other. That goes to what we were talking about before. Comics are malleable enough to adjust, but they're solid enough that there's real structure, there's real background, there's real continuity. Anytime a problem comes up, just like what we've been doing, oh, well, we could do this, or maybe we could do that. We're not just making shit up because we think it's cool. We're going, oh, wow, remember Psylocke? Oh, well, remember,
Yeah, and it's like we have a working knowledge of these characters enough to where you can just go, yo, you think of this, I got this part, and it comes together, and it's like it's a working part of the imagination. That's what comics is all about.
Yeah,
that's like the way, it's just knowing these characters and just being able to bullshit with someone, and you make something out of it.
Yeah. Which is why it just bores me sometimes thinking about working in other fields where, you're sitting there just typing away and going,
Yep.
I don't know. Let's ask the lawyers what they think. Let's ask the promotion department what they.
Right. And that X-Men show I was telling you about earlier, this is one of the hosts of it right here. Saying this Arab X-Men means so much to me. Thank you, sir, for your work on Bishop in particular. He also asked a question that I think we already touched on. But just to kind of reiterate, creating Image Comics seems like a massive decision. When you started, what were your hopes for the endeavor?
Everything that happened, and a lot of things that we didn't envision, but we always envisioned that it was the promo line that we gave to Wizard. People forget the other side of that was Wizard, that we had this voice because we didn't have the internet. We had Wizard magazine, but the other side of that, even though it was the promo, was that we were doing comics the way we wanted to, the way we knew you guys wanted to.
Right. Similar to what we're doing on the show now with the whole Archangel pitch.
Yeah. Because, like to put it in film parlance, almost everybody in Hollywood will always come up and say and complain about the gatekeepers, that want to keep everything the way it is, and Marvel and DC were starting to get that way, and we were the young blood going, no, let's try this. And we're going off of Dark Knight.
Right. Is a young blood a pun intended scenario?
Rob is sending me the check.
Rob is sending.
but that's what comics is. It's the young blood coming in and saying, no, this is the next way. A lot of you guys don't know this, but in the first incarnation of Wildstorm was Homage Studios, where it was Jim Lee, Scott Williams, and myself. And then we got the very first ever assistant, Carl Altstetter, who today is a toy artist with if I believe Mattel. But he was our buddy. He was your guy's age. And so we were starting to get a little older, we were mid-20s. and this is the way it played, with Jim and I, right? If Jim came up with a cool concept or did a drawing, if Carl didn't think it was cool, we redid it. If Carl thought it was cool, we then pushed it further. Because he knew if Carl reacts, that's the way you guys are going to react.
Right.
We're on, and that's what we've always carried through. That's why Image, we've always brought in the new people, the new teams with the new ideas that we wouldn't have thought about,
Right. And that's the beauty of Image is you have so much different stuff. And then I always view Image, and I don't like to talk political parties because that's my major in college, and it's just something I don't like doing. It's hard. It's bad enough as it is, but eventually, as a third party concept, like the Green Party, that are all about preserving the environment, that'll eventually get indulged in and overlapped by the big political party, either Republican or Democrat, and they'll absorb that niche of a party.
Right.
That though. Everyone knows that, but that's kind of the way I see Image Comics with their creators, right? They get new blood in, new talent, and eventually that's their stepping stone for getting into Marvel and DC, right? Donny Cates, God Country was phenomenal for Image. I was his breaking into the industry. He did other work, but this was his first well-known project, right? Now look what he's doing. He has taken Venom, a character that was created in the 88, right? 88, I believe. And completely kind of not revamped, but giving it new light to where he's a huge character study. And it's the most seminal work in Marvel for the past 3 years. No. It's that's the fun thing about fate and things that happen. We were doing it because we thought it would be cool and would be fun, and this is where our heads were, and we're finding it was where your guys' heads and hearts were. And just finding out later on that the X-Men was really about inclusivity and bigger picture stuff, that's cool to be part of that. Yeah. It's just so cool when what you like is actually something bigger, Right. Something cool that they are doing right now is they're doing an X-Men Legends series where it's revamping stories from the 90s. So Fabian Nicieza just did an Adam X story with Brett Booth, which was kind of fun. It was really fun because it's something in the 90s that was a kind of a running joke. It's now canon. And then Louis and Walter are now doing an X Factor story, which takes place before issue 34. So So, Whilce, if we ever want to put our heads together, we can pitch this to Marvel and get in the X-Men Legends book. I'm just throwing it out there, right?
Well, I'm doing a few little things that I can't talk about right now, so I'm slowly kind of exploring that. We'll see where my head goes, because again, I'm always thinking about the larger picture, and I'm actually diving into animation and some other things too. But maybe we'll talk in a couple of weeks.
Brian Kivon, yeah. Do you know when Saga's coming back? I know you don't, but I love Saga.
No, that's one of the other things about this. Everything makes so much money now that you could actually get in trouble for beating the promotion department, Right. NDAs now are common air right now, which is kind of sad, because I don't know if you remember I believe it was Elektra.
Right.
And it was taking Miller 5 million years, right, to do another graphic novel. And then what he would do, like, and I'm joking because I forget the exact timeline, but what he would do every 2 years would be drop 5 pages, right? And everybody goes, "Holy shit, this is
Yeah.
good."
Right.
And then nobody complains for a year, and
Right.
then another year goes by, and then he drops 5 more. And especially in today's market where people want to absorb everything and be a part of everything, I'm one of the guys that believe that, hey, as you're developing and building up a book, start dropping it, man.
Right.
Start making your audience.
Right. And that's what I love about Terry Dodson right now with Adventure Man. Got the poster right there, is that he's always posting promotional things for us. So like I know he's working on the next few issues, right? And it's not coming for a little bit of time. And it's like, I'm so excited every time I see a post, like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And
because
I love seeing that stuff.
That's a little of what we did with Wizard. Because right back then it was, okay, every Wednesday you can see a new comic book or not see a new comic book, right? If it didn't make the deadline. But for that particular comic book, it was that Wednesday of that month and then 30 days later, right? Well, with Wizard Magazine, then we had, contest, we had, the 10 numbered artists, the 10 top writers, we had insights into what was being developed. Sometimes we would have contests where, hey, we're going to make this great big villain. Here's the rough sketch of it. Let's have a contest to name the villain, And so my point is, it just kept the energy going instead of going Wednesday and then dying off. And then Wednesday again a month later.
And then you remember it like, oh, this was a thing that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's now building and building, because then look at what it led to. Then everybody, because they're constantly be whipping up into a frenzy every now and then through the 30 days. It's now then, well, where's the cartoon? Where's the movie? Where are the
toys? Right. And I think like that's what made me really want to read Spawn, is just seeing the toys and seeing everything, right? Because I think everyone is a little bit of a Spawn fan. If you never touch a Spawn comic, right? You go to Target, right? Even when Toys R Us was a thing. Oh, geez, I'm old. You could see like these Spawn figures. I'm like, that looks so badass. Like, I want that toy, but it's like, I don't know Spawn, but I already feel like I'm part of the universe because there's such a market for it. There's so much availability to do, like Todd McFarlane's like amazing skills. And it's like, I just bought this first companion. I'm like, now I know what it's like to be a Spawn fan, to feel that.
Well, Spawn is one of those characters that is almost universal.
Right.
I remember the first time I went to Mexico, I was brought there as quote unquote the Spawn artist. And Spawn is massive there. I was piled there. I mean, there, and at that point I hadn't drawn Spawn for a couple of years, but it was like Spawn was that. And when I go back to the Philippines, Spawn is like, I mean, when we teach building an IP today, one of the universal tenets is to have a universal story. Who can't relate to, I'd even make a pact with the devil to be back with my wife, right? Who wouldn't understand that?
Right. And it's a very simple story, but there are also like a lot of underlying factors. Like with Ghost Rider, right? Robbie Wright has made a deal with the devil to save his younger brother. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know if have you seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
No.
That was very prevalent in that movie, or not movie, in the show. It was great. But to Spawn, it's like, it makes it so much like more relatable. Like if you care about somebody that much, obviously you're gonna come back no matter what shape or form.
To rant a little bit, any great story, no matter what medium, is basically a simple story.
Right.
I mean, the first trilogy was a father and son story, right? The whole story for that for 6, 7, and 8, right? 6, 7, was it 6, 7?
I'm on issue 5.
No,
I'm
4,
on issue
5,
5.
6. No, 4, 5, 6. Okay. The whole story for those first 3 movies, was a kid who thought he was an orphan, and then finds out his dad is actually still alive, and then finds out his dad is the worst person in the whole universe, but he just found out his dad's alive. So he's the last person to give up on his dad, becoming a good person again.
Right.
It's a simple story.
Right. And I'm on issue 3, 5. I'm just like, oh, you're spoiling. Here's a question right here from Fable. Are you reading X-Men currently? If so, what are your thoughts on Hickman's X-Men? I'm sure you've heard the buzz about it.
No, unfortunately, I haven't read them. Unfortunately, I'm in that space where some of you guys knew this, but we got hit a lot when in the first 3 years of Image because of deadlines and stuff. And I will battle anybody toe to toe, because what really was happening was that we were getting the calls and trying to massage the deals with the lawyers and everything for everything that you guys were asking for, because we started talking about the games, we started talking about the movies, we started talking about the animation, and this was after our second issues.
Right.
And then you all remember after the approximately after the second issues, then we brought in the other guys and we started all the other books. And now we were managing like 5 million books each and big production. I mean, Wildstorm at the heyday was 74 people, and we had some of the top talents there and some of the big books. And so today it's the same thing for me. I mean, like, there's a lot of things I can't say, but one of the things that I'm very much looking forward to, that I can talk a little bit about, is I'm from the Philippines, and that's where I discovered Lineal U and Philip Tan. Just because I started by chance a school over there and a studio and discovered those people. Well, I'm now in negotiations with some of the big animation studios over there to start creating, training them to create new IP that is Filipino brand, that we take into animation and film and comic books. And that kind of exercises and brings me back to the beginning Image days. And so, for the last few months, I've just been on constant Zooms and constant planning and talking to the government over there about how they can help and make sure these things go through and stuff like that. And right now, the long-winded answer is, after doing 30 plus years of the creative side of things, I want to kind of get back to the teaching part of it. And now I could not just individually train. I might be able to totally ramp up a whole industry, back in my own hometown.
That's amazing.
That's, for me, that's cool. That's energy. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to keep up with everything. I leave that to you, Brandon, because you're so excited about all that stuff.
And they all know that I'm reading it religiously. And I didn't know you were talking about Star Wars earlier. I just got a little distracted by the comment section as well. Just like trying to get everyone's question, because like I know that there's also a great opportunity for everyone to try to like talk to you, because we haven't been able to see our some of our favorite creators in 2 years going on. So I love, everyone knows I love Star Wars. It was like, I call it my gateway drug, because that's what I was first introduced to at like 5 years old. Star Wars was my gateway drug into everything else.
Well, do you guys understand what a seismic shift it was for Hollywood? I mean, there was no such thing as sequels. The only sequel at the time was Jaws 2. And then they went to Jaws 3D and that failed. And so they decided not to do sequels again. And then Star Wars came out.
Right.
It has to be sequels because there's 9 of them.
Well, I really count 6. but to like the whole sequel thing, Star Wars is generational. I used to be a karate teacher before I messed up my hips. So some of my karate students, right, would come in, right, for Halloween. They would be wearing like Poe Dameron and Rey, like some little girls wearing Rey costumes, Kylo Ren. In my day, people were dressing up like Captain Rex, or like people from the Clone Wars. Because I grew up on the Clone Wars and it's still going on. They revamped it 12 years later. And it's amazing. Like, I remember in 2nd grade, I would come home every Friday night and it was on. Boom, boom. That's a Star Wars that I related to. My father, he's a little bit older. Original trilogy, his younger brother was able to see the Phantom Menace in screens when he was like 7. So Star Wars is generational. And even though like they didn't do a good job, but this was this generation Star Wars that they can relate to.
Right. Well, I have a different take on that because, and it's using some of the some of the words that Hollywood is now using is you have to give credit to George that he built such a unique, easily identifiable, easily welcoming world for any generation to walk into. And here's the key thing, walk into and feel it's their own so that George could leave it and could allow other people to take it, even if the big boy fails,
Right.
The big D, it's no matter what, the world is there and it's ingrained in every fan's
right.
heart, and they could do something with it now, and it'll keep going beyond George. And that's one of those few. One of some of those few. I mean, you got to count in there. Lord of the Rings, right?
Harry
Potter, right? There are very few things. I mean, like as big and cool as Aliens, and everybody loves Aliens. The world isn't that solid, isn't that easy to get into, right?
Right. It's a little bit more complex. It's Marvel. You start, you finish, and with like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, it's like they introduce so many different, not only characters, but different, I like to call it like more families, more like different kind of groups. So like you can go tell your own story, like Game of Thrones, right? There's so many characters, you can always make a sequel. What I meant by like Star Wars being like generational is like there's something new for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Which is not like saying, okay, this is their Star Wars, this is their Star Wars. More like this is an expansion of this world that came in this generation for them to get their way into, which is what you were saying.
Right, and it's controversial, but I think one thing that Disney did do right was they showed us that inadvertently by introducing a new cast that wasn't tied totally directly to the old cast, and showing us that, okay, even if Luke died, it'll still go on.
Right.
And then look at all the canon of the stuff that we never saw in the past in the movies, but now is like called canon and feels like it's more real,
Right.
And that's what the X-Men is, it's that world where, again, earlier we could riff, like, we could just, and I imagine fanboys all over the place always getting together and being able to riff, but any other fan can drop into that conversation and just go along with that too, because that world is
right.
complete. It's just so there. It's a complete world. It's real world building. It's not just for this story. It's this story started it off, and now it could go on and on and on. And that's what all the big franchises in comics are,
Right.
Batman, Superman, Superman is still the same, though there are a lot of people trying to make him more emotional, right? But, Superman is still the goody two shoes guy, right? The guy who's always going to do right. And Batman always the one gonna do what needs to be done.
Right. And to super, I don't know. I never really liked I like Superman, but I don't.
Well, there's a fundamental reason why you don't. What Stan started in the 60s, and this is all Stan, most of it, right? Is he gave us heroes that were real heroes. And what I mean by that is that a hero is really a person who is in the right place where a problem is there and only he has the skills to solve it. So that's why, Peter Parker was a nerd, couldn't socialize with the girls, without them. That's why he needed the mask. He puts on the mask, and now he could be brave. Now he could be the jokester and stuff. Iron Man, heart problem. That's why he's doing all this stuff, because he needs the technology to keep up his heart, which is the problem I have in the movies, because after this, I think it's the second movie,
they took it away.
Yeah, there's no problem. So now he's perfect. So what I'm getting at is Superman was the first hero that was perfect. So like as a writer, you come in and you're trying to, set up drama or conflict, and you're going, okay, well, I'm going to set up this story where Superman is in danger, and everybody unconsciously go, ha, 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 right. Superman is in danger.
He comes back in the Justice League movie, and for 3 minutes, and it's like you could have started out of this movie in 5 minutes with Superman.
Yeah.
But what I do like about the current writer of Superman is he's teaching Clark how to be a dad.
Yeah.
Which is really cool, because it's like if you need a hero of that caliber to grow, there needs to be some kind of sharpening of the sword. And I think for that, as Superman is like not necessarily making him more emotional, but making him more of a complete person by being a dad, by learning how to take that next step.
That totally makes sense, because when he came onto this planet and it had a different gravity, he instantly all of a sudden got these powers. He didn't have these powers back then because of the gravity. It was just a science fiction thing. And so my point there is the gravity didn't do anything to his brain and his heart. So he didn't just instantly learn how to be a dad. And he's like the last person to know what it means to grow up with your real dad. I mean, even though he grew up with Pa Kent as his dad, but then find out that, wait a minute, he's not my real dad. Well, talk to any orphan that goes through that. No matter how good Pa Kent was, you're not thinking about Pa Kent anymore at that point, Right. So he's gonna have issues. He's not gonna throw his kids around the world, when they have a temper tantrum, but he is gonna have issues with how to do that right, especially with his mind of I have to do it right because everybody looks at me and I can't make mistakes. That's interesting.
Right. And I think that's like, for me, it's like, I find Superman to be a very easy character to write, but also very difficult because everyone relates to him differently. It's like you look at Captain America, everyone has their different version of who Captain America is because they represent something that everyone aspires to be. Right? Like not everyone will want to be Bruce Banner. Not everyone will want to be Peter Parker. But when you look at your heroes that are probably like the most, like I said, like sharpened, you're more complete, you have Superman and Captain America. So it's like the difficultness, and this is what the MCU did so well, is they gave you like a Captain America, and they're still doing it to this day with Falcon and Winter Soldier. That is for everyone.
Yeah. To go a little tangent, if I have a big critique of quote unquote American superheroes, it's this penchant for what we were talking about earlier with Tony Stark. I mean, I make this position that one of the main reasons that a big, huge audience got into those first two movies with Robert Downey because I don't know if you remember at the time, Robert Downey was a big major star, but he was on the big fall.
Right.
This was he just come out of second time of rehab, and so it was like, dude, strike three, man, strike three. So he did this, and because I remember when they announced Iron Man, we were going cool, and then when they announced that Iron Man was going to be a drunk, and that he was going to have problems, we're going, wait a minute, that's not Tony. And then we hear that it's Robert Downey, and we go, that might work, because that's how people think of Robert Downey at the time, you know? And so my big rant is that as it got successful, then like we just discussed earlier, they got rid of that human side of him. You know, he never teetered on the, you know, the AAA wagon again, or, you know,
Right.
they didn't really build up this, okay, so what is the real wall between him and, you know, what's her name?
And yeah.
And so that is a template that started with Wolverine. You guys don't know this, but when Wolverine came out and started really blowing, we were told, don't do any backstory for Wolverine. Everybody, we want to keep Wolverine mysterious. That was the template. But for me, it read a different way. It read that now when our heroes become grade A, they're disconnected from the world. So like going back to Superman, remember? I mean, it became a joke after all. I mean, he even had a dog, right?
Crypto, that's my man right there. Okay.
So what the fuck happened to all that?
Right.
You know, it's like, and Superman would be one of the few characters that would actually keep that, because he lost it all. Not only did he lose his parents, but he lost all his people,
Right.
and the whole planet. So coming down here and then making these connections because of Ma and Pa, and then just because now he's on the pedestal, he loses all that. That doesn't make sense to me. And I think one of the disconnects that we start having with Superman. But then again, it's everywhere. So I'd like there to be more connections with our past, you know, with our heroes' past. And I mean, most of us, right? Most of us are our group of friends, our family. Some of the family are embarrassing, but they're family. You know, you still will get them a Christmas present, you know, and you still will know what their favorite color is and stuff like that. And then in times like this in a pandemic, hey, that irksome brother, he's a doctor. So he could give you the download on what's really happening.
And my family is Jewish, so we do have a doctor and a lawyer and a deli owner, so we're set for the pandemic.
You have a movie producer.
I don't know if we got that far, but but yeah, to your point about Iron Man, I think like what the MCU failed in is when they did, I think it was almost a regret, because their story ended after Iron Man 2 with him. That's why Iron Man 3 was almost such a dud. I don't want to call it a dud because it was still an enjoyable movie. I'm still able to walk away from that movie saying this was really cool, but they didn't really take anything with Tony Stark's character. There wasn't anything left to do, right? They already told Demon in a Bottle. They already told all the essentially Armor Wars. They did everything that they had to, right? So after that...
But think of how more interesting that could have been if in the crux of a lot of those events, especially like the wars, that he started to teeter again. You know, he started to drink again and started making wrong decisions. Imagine how more interesting that could have been too. You know, if they kept track to those, you know, to his real backstory.
Right. And yeah, I think that was a major flaw in the movie, was just making him just someone that no one really cared for at that time, right? Now, what the biggest problems was his lawsuits, or like everything that he was stepping away from, because he was perfect. Right now he's with the Avengers. He's doing stuff with Avengers Mansion. What brought me back to him was when he started mentoring Spider-Man, which is really cool, because now he has purpose. He's brought down to that level because he discovered little young Tom Holland, Peter Parker.
Right. And again, that's everything that Stan was doing. He was taking humans and making them superheroes, but not forgetting that they were humans.
Right. It's almost like the Umbrella Academy. It's like you introduce them as people first. The powers are just a supplement to the story.
Right.
You know, and that's another reason why Bishop works so well, kind of to toot your own horn a little bit.
Right. And then look at how we talk about the original team. You know, we both remember, okay, Warren's cool as Archangel, but he's the rich brat.
Right.
You know, Cyclops is, can make great decisions, but he's flawed. You know,
right.
Storm is the perfect, strong leader, but she's detached from her emotions.
Right. And Beast is your scientist.
You know,
right.
We know them as people. We know them as human beings, not just their powers and their costume. And I think that's where a lot of Hollywood fails today, that they concentrate just on the
raw power of the person.
Yeah, and the cynical approach there, the cynical thought there is that the $1 million value on like a Superman is, this, the curly Q, the S, the cape, and the red and the blue.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's all you got to do.
That's all that's important. Those are the $1 million things. That's all we're concerned about. Do whatever you want with everything else, but make sure that you keep it. And so it just starts to get sterile.
Right. Same thing with the Batman stories in the movies. You have to nail the origin story.
Yeah.
You have to nail it. If that's a dud, because that could also be someone's first introduction to Batman, but it's also, we all know his story. Like, even though you may not read comics, right? You may not have seen a Batman show. You know generally who Batman is, where he started. And I was just talking with Becky Clune and Michael Conrad the other day. They're writing Wonder Woman. The thing about Wonder Woman is there's always a little bit more to be explored.
Yeah.
Like, she's a little bit more mysterious, more like Wolverine, in the sense that you know the name, but you don't necessarily know what's going on, which makes them so interesting.
Right. And what was the character you're talking about right before that? Before Wonder Woman?
I said Wolverine. I said Wolverine. I said
no. Like going back to Batman and how he became Dark Knight. Remember, so Batman started as way back when as the vigilante hero. Wow, what a novel idea, right? And then you go through decades, and because of the code, well, Bruce never actually killed anybody and did vigilante type things, really. And so when Miller walks into office and says, what if Bruce was an aging middle-aged Sean Connery and he was psychotic because the world is so crazy? It just makes sense that maybe Bruce Wayne, the Batman, could go to that point.
Right.
It just made sense. Because again, now we're going back into the human side of Batman.
Right.
He was becoming the myth too much. And it wasn't even a myth that could hold himself up to Wolverine, because Wolverine would kill.
Right. I do want to end with one more question, because we are about to hit that 2-hour mark in 12 minutes. It's this completely like flown by. For everyone here, thank you guys so much. Whilce, man, thank you so much for being here. This is awesome. One more question for you. Who is one creator that you never teamed up with that you wish you had?
I like playing in different ponds, so I actually would find it very interesting to work with some of the Japanese creators, in anime and manga, to really explore that side, because there's a lot of things that, like I said, when we were in the X office, we were being exposed to Macross and Appleseed, and we fed that into the X-Men, and you guys gobbled that up. And a lot of what is happening today is a direct, quote unquote, descendant from some of that stuff. So I would love to go, to show you how old I am, when I was growing up in Hawaii, I fell in love with a lot of the Tokatsu and Toei stuff. So I'm like a Kikaida fan, a Kamen Rider fan, and some of that stuff. And so it would be really cool to bring those guys into the modern age, and then bring them into modern American superheroes, because one of the things that going through the Punisher office, X-Men office, and then Image, one of the things that was a constant through there was this belief with all of us that every 3 to 5 years things change. So we've got to be on top of what's that new thing.
Right.
We got to go into that next thing. And I truly believe, especially with what we were talking about, how they're kind of like framing back, and keeping a tight frame around the MCU stuff, right?
Right.
The movies, and going away from the human side. I think the world audience is going to start to now want to see, okay, what's on the other sides? What are French heroes like? What are Japanese heroes, modern heroes like? What are Filipino heroes like? And so I can see that being like the next massive wave, because then what you get is, imagine a Justice League being developed and being popular in Japan, and a new Justice League in France. And then you have the Justice Wars, where the original Justice League goes toe to toe with the Japanese, I mean,
that's awesome, man. That would be so badass.
Franchises, man. And they're all different because of what we are talking about, what we love, that they're human.
Right. 100%, man.
Human characteristics, so the Japanese characteristics, Filipino characteristics, Jewish characteristics,
Yeah. What we have is Ragman, and that's not enough.
There just should be a little more. There should be a little more. You have a little bit of a history to draw.
Oh man. Thank you, Alonzo, man, for coming in, man. You're a little late though. You're about 2 hours, but it's all good, man. He's right around LA too, so.
Oh, cool.
So I'm sure he was watching baseball today. But that was an excellent kind of wrap up to a great interview. I almost forgot I was interviewing for a second. Whilce, thank you so much for doing this. I know this was in the works for a while. Before we do go, is there anything that you do want to talk about that you can promote?
I'm working on something, coming out with something, and the only thing I can say is that hopefully we'll get it up by the end of the year, and it will be with Brian Haberlin, and then, like I said, I'm doing a few little things with Marvel, so we'll see if I have the energy to get back into things full time. For another interview, for the next interview we do, I really like talking with you. I really like interviews where we talk. Like I told you before backstage, I've done 30 plus years of lots of interviews where they ask exact same questions, and I have to give the exact same answer, because then because I change my mind all the time. So I really like interviews where we're just chatting about stuff that we're totally passionate about. So maybe the next time, if you feel it's something that your audience would like, is that a lot of people don't know yet of what personally has happened to me through the years. Like the first time you guys saw me disappear was in 2000, and I was. You guys don't know this because this was undercover. Marvel just approved me developing a totally new X-Men book. And then a couple weeks later, I fell into a 1-week diabetic coma. And I couldn't draw for 10 years after that, because I flatlined once in that week. I went through 4 bouts of dialysis, and I lost 40 pounds in that 1 week. And it's been a struggle to get my energy back to do stuff full time, but I think I might be back to that point. So if you're interested at all in that, I'd love to start talking about that, because there's a lot of people that deal with that, with medical issues,
Right. I mean,
stuff.
we could still talk about it today, because I know this is an important topic. And I am glad that you're doing much better and back to almost 100%.
Well, it's that whole thing of, I'm one of those guys that, never show it,
Right.
never show the struggle, because you show this, in my mind, you show the struggle and then you're just concentrating on the struggle. Because
Right.
one interesting fact was that the week before I went into a coma, my middle son was born. Just 1 week after he was born, I was in a coma. And so, believe it or not, for I believe 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 4 years, I never asked my doctor what happened. I didn't find out about flatlining for bouts of dialysis, because for those first 3 years, all I concentrated was on, getting enough energy to help raise my son. And I believe in that now, that if my son wasn't born the week before that, and if I spent that first 3 years moping around going, what the fuck happened to me? Shit, man, I was just about to start a new X book. I had all these ideas and stuff. If I'd concentrated on all that negative stuff,
You wouldn't be where you are today.
no.
No. And that's the thing. It's like everyone has their own kind of trauma that happens to them, right? We all have something going on that's behind the scenes, and if you turn your life into that problem, and this is like what I've come to realize, and if you turn your life into that problem, it's going to affect everything else, and it's going to make the problem worse in the long run.
Right.
Right.
And the other side of that is what you were beginning to say, is that everybody has their story. And so that's what that's what concerns me about society's push to identifying people and labeling people right away. Because I don't know how many people, almost everybody that I've known in my life, my first impressions are totally different than how and why I love them to today.
Right.
Until you actually then carve out that time to really find out who they are, then you don't really understand them. And so you can't really judge them. And then in my mind, you're missing out on quite a bit.
Right.
There are a lot of people that, my younger self would never, 100 years think would be a close friend.
Right.
I mean, look, to alleviate it a little more, for years I got flack for always, backing up Rob Liefeld and saying, he's a cool guy, and it's so easy to, rag on him, right? And some of that is his fault, but, he is a family guy.
Right.
And I'm a family guy, and that's really important to me. And so that's one of the characteristics I look for people. How connected are you to your family? And if you're not, is there a real reason? Oh shit, sorry, I didn't know that. Then it's for me, it's the little things, and that's what I do, right? That's how I make you guys connect to Bishop and other characters, by putting in those little things. Because it's easy to say, oh, he has gamma powers now.
Right. He can time travel. Great.
Yeah, it's easy. But, why did this vigilante survive all these decades? Why did this perfect superhero survive all this
right
time? It was the little things.
Right.
And that's what that year 2000 taught me. It's the little things.
Right. Right. And it's an incredible story so far. I would love to hear more about it. Definitely would love to have you back on the show, since you already invited yourself back.
Don't tell my wife. But yes, yeah, sure. If you guys can set it up, no problem. This is one of the best times I've had in a long time.
That makes me very happy.
I mean, we even started this backstage, right?
Yeah, we started this backstage. We instantly started talking. For me, as someone who's 20 years old, I don't like to talk about my life experience because it's not something that is everyone's business. I had to mature. I had to grow up at the age of 13, at the age of 14. Let's just say my dad was in a very similar position as Tony Stark, and I would have to even because I was at 14, I was managing school, work, and being home to be there. So I would grow up, and I missed a lot of those teenage experiences that my twin brother has had, Is
that why you latched on to comics?
Yeah, it was actually Frank Miller's Daredevil run that got me into comics. Because Matt Murdock's struggle was something that I really resonated with, and it pulled me out of a very dark spot, which we've all been in.
Right.
And then even today I'm battling, hip problems. I've had 3 surgeries. I'm going on a 4th one in a year. I just had a 3rd one a month ago. Almost exactly a month ago. So, I love this comment. But volume 2 is coming soon. 2nd omnibus, but that's when I'm interviewing people, right? Is I'm always, and even in my job, in my field, I'm always trying to act, okay, I'm 20. How can I make people think I'm 30, right? And that's just the way that I'm always out. I'm not going to tell people I've had to grow up. I'm going to let it show for myself.
Right. Exactly.
And that's when I interview people, it's oh, that 20-year-old, oh, that young kid, that he's still a kid, but I'm yeah, I know just as much as y'all, but and that's the beauty of these interviews is not just the knowledge that I've had in comics, but it's the conversations that you're able to get just chatting with someone as a person, not asking the same question, who's your favorite X-Men character, or just your basic what you'll see at a convention that's always on repeat, and that's what I love about it.
Well, in the big macro too, you could make connections to the beginning of Hollywood and film, where it's entertainment, right? And so for decades, a lot of people didn't think much of it, and a lot of people still don't think much of it, right? Beyond that, it's just fluff, right? You've heard those things. Actors say something and shut up and just act, right?
Right.
Well, one of the ways they developed it was through things like this, where interviewers who are not only fans and historians and know about that stuff, but who know enough about human nature and psychology and are able to then ask those questions. So when you did Taxi Driver, was that a part of you? And what was that a part, to ask those questions that every creator in every field thinks about to create these characters, because we know, especially in comics, superheroic people in superheroic situations. Well, who can relate to that directly, right? Well, put in enough human nature into them, then you can relate, and now you can connect, and so conversations that go deeper like that with comics will slowly start showing everybody that, yeah, comics is not only entertainment too.
Right. And
which is why, again, our back and forth with what maybe we could do with Archangel and stuff, and staying within the parameters of the universe of the X-Men.
Right.
It shows how solid it is, and what a furtive, creative world that's already been built because of kiddie, entertainment medium.
Right. And also for everyone who is showing up a little bit later, we did pitch an Archangel story, so go back and look at that. It never happens.
Who's the X-Men editor now?
Huh? I'm sorry.
Who's the X-Men editor now?
I'm sorry?
Who's the X-Men editor now?
Who's on Hickman's editorial? I don't know. Not Bob Harris.
No,
I don't know. I could grab.
You see?
I could look at it real quick. Let me get my book. No one go anywhere. I'm lucky that the first X-Men book or their first book in my pile is an X-Men book, but let's see. They put the credits like halfway through. It's the editor-in-chief is CB Sobuski, which we all know. I probably butchered that. The editors are Chris Robinson, Shannon Andrews, Ballesteros, and Jordan D. White, who's a very good editor. And then Jonathan Hickman is also editing. He's like the main person.
Oh, okay. I've dealt with Jordan. I did something a while ago with him, and CB's actually an old friend of mine. So maybe I'll drop CB a line.
You know what? You guys heard it first. I'm telling y'all right now. Y'all heard it first. Yeah, but that's like the beauty is like we're all fans. We're all fans of this medium, and it all has different like personal connections, which brings us together.
Right.
Like, when there's a pandemic going on, right, and you can't talk to anyone, you have a family here, right?
Yeah.
And like the one thing I've learned, especially being in comics and like talking to people in the community, is mileage doesn't necessarily translate to friendship. You know, like I have friends all over the world, like all the way in New Zealand, you know, all the way in Canada. I'm trying to find where, like, Travis, all the way in Canada, you know, who lives in the middle of nowhere. I say he's from Krakoa because he's in the middle of nowhere. If he keeps giving me our time, I'll change it to Madripoor. But
I think I'd rather that.
So it's like this hobby brings us all together, really. And we each have personal reasons, and we're able to come together and just give each other like a space to be ourselves. Like we're like the realest people,
Right?
When talking about comics, something fictional, and I love it.
Yeah, and that's why, you know, I mean, think about it. We started the convention route thing, right, from way back when, and Hollywood has a lot of money, right? Gaming has a lot of money. Sports has a lot of money. Did they make up their own conventions? No, they're writing hours.
Right.
And why? Because we have all the fans and all the love everything.
Right. And that was the motto.
We're all people. We're all, you know, that's what comics stands for. We're all people.
Right. And I was listening to Rob Liefeld's podcast. That was exactly what he said when, like in verbatim, when he was talking about the origin of Image. He's like, we have all the fans and we know that. You know, I may not always love what he does on social media, but I love the passion he has for the industry and the passion he has for the people around him. Like when I'm talking comics, I aspire to talk like Rob Liefeld. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Because that's the key word there, passion. And that's the first thing corporate loses. They lose the passion. You know, they lose listening. You know, like my story with, you know, the beginning of Wildstorm, and we had, you know, our first assistant, Carl Alstetter. You know, we would listen. You know, and every good creator listens. You know, because we're doing it. We're doing it for ourselves, yeah, but we're doing it really for you guys because you guys are the ones, you know, keeping us up there, keeping us
employed.
Yeah.
The blatant truth of it. And that's why I was always saying, if you guys want John Kent to be de-aged back to a kid, buy Super Sons so it can change. But that's really the beauty of everything, you know, is that it all comes full circle, and we're all able to learn from each other. Right. Like you look at this character a different way, right? And even creators have different takes on different characters. Fans have different takes on different characters. Right. And it's all like that word we keep coming back to is passion. Yeah. 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 Our characters connect for a reason. And that's why you, like you said, you know, people can see different things in them, you know, like you connecting with Daredevil for not the reasons I connected with him, but your reasons may even be more valid than my reasons, but my reasons are my reasons too. Right. And your reasons are your reasons. And the character was
well done and big enough that you could see that,
Right.
see what you needed to see in him.
Right.
You know?
And that's really like what I like to talk about when I do these interviews, is not necessarily right what's actually the contents of this issue, of like what it means to you as a fan, as getting to do it, right? Having those like conversations instead of just fanboying and saying like, I could say, oh my gosh, Whilce, I love your art, man. Like you're one of my favorites, you know? Like I could totally do that for an hour. How much time do you have? But whenever I sit down to do an interview, right, I'll read what I need to read. I'll do everything. But these are the notes I'll take. These are the notes that'll be like, they'll be basic outlines, right? I'll have like, okay, I want to talk about this, this, and this. Just to make sure that I hit them in some order. But I will never write an actual question because I think it loses that sense of conversation and personality. Because no one wants to answer a robot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I think that's why the interviews go so well. I mean, we've had a lot of people turn up for this, which is fantastic. Big shout out to you guys. And it's just amazing, man.
Well, kudos to you, man. It looks like you found a way. You found a path.
Thank you, man.
And that's what life is all about, man, right? That's
100%. And I think that does wrap the show, and I will definitely have you on. You know, maybe we can even do something, because I know I talked to Lionel a lot. We can do something with just the three of them. That would be cool. That would be awesome. Plan it out.
Oh, yeah. No, we go way back.
Yeah. He mentioned that a little bit. He's like, I'm going to send you the Whilce. And I said, but anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I put everything, all of Whilce's social medias in the description below. If you guys do want to go find his works, not much is in getting reprinted, but I'm sure if you email Image a lot, somehow Todd McFarlane will decide to republish it for some. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Whilce, thank you so much for being here, man. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, and stay safe and keep going, man. Always we say in the Philippines, more power to you, man.
More power to you. That's what Lionel said to me.
Oh, really?
Thank you guys so much. Everyone have a great night.
All right.